Welcome to Session Sunday. Hi guys, it's Jack Edwards, and in today's video we're going to be focusing on passing and moving. But before we get into this week's video, make sure to leave us a like and subscribe, and if you missed last week's video, click on the link above. Okay, so moving into the first part of this week's session, we're going to be taking a look at a sequence which is focusing on passing and moving and then playing forward. But before we get into it, let's have a look at how many players we've got this week and the equipment that we'll be using. So in terms of players, this week we're going to have 12 outfield players. So we're not going to be working with goalkeepers, okay? But if you do have goalkeepers, we can just adapt parts of the session to then work as if you do have goalkeepers involved. So whether it's 1 or 2 goalkeepers. So in the first drill, we're going to be splitting our group into 2 groups of 6. In terms of the equipment, we're going to be using balls, bibs, cones, and then small-sided goals. If you don't have small-sided goals, you can use some poles instead. And then if you have mannequins, you can use them for this part of the session as well. So in terms of the setup for this part of the session, so from where the goals are into this player in here, okay, is going to be 10 yards, and we're going to have a further 10 yards to this player, and then it's just going to be 5 yards in between these 2 players here, and then a further 10 yards there. So we're going 15, 10 and 10. So in total, we've got 35 yards. In terms of the width, we're going to be doing 10 yards either side in here, okay? And then in terms of like a little bit further wider, so the goals can just be situated just where the wide poles start or cones, and then you can just have a little bit more width so the players can move into to then play into the goals. So what we'll be doing is we're going to be moving the ball forwards, okay, setting back, moving it out, and then what we're going to be doing is focusing on a quick combination to play forward, okay? So the ball will start by moving into this player here, okay? They will then set the ball back to the start point, okay, whilst moving out, okay, because they're going to be timing their movement. Then what we'll see is that the ball will then get played high into this player here. This player here then sets the ball to the wide player, okay. The wide player then looks to combine quite quickly, okay, with the player inside, so they're going back on themselves. So then this player will set in here, okay, into the middle, and it will get set into space for them to move on to and then play forward. So we want it to be as much one-touch football as we can, okay? So these first 2 passes in here can be one touch, and then what we're focusing on in here is this player is looking to receive it this side of the cone, okay? Or they can receive it here to set in and then come back round to then move on to the ball, okay? Or when they receive it, they can open out, okay, play inside, and then make that movement in behind, because we want some sort of movement to be able to move into space. This player will then set out into there and then play forward. So in terms of the movements, the players just move up one each time. So the player at the start point will move to the central area, okay? The player who is central moves high, the player who is high moves wide, and the player who is wide moves back to the start. So then we'll go off the opposite side this time. So it's getting played in, okay, so our receiving skills, our ability to play first time, getting moved out, so then this player is creating an angle for this player to receive it, gets played in, okay, then it gets played out. So this is one of the only real places where we want to take a touch. But at first, the players can look to take a touch, especially in these areas, okay, to get into the rhythm, okay, get a feel for the ball, and once they get more confident, try and play one touch. Then this player's looking to set in here, okay, gets set into space, so try and use that cone and that pole as the defender to get away from, and then when it comes in, it's either first time or a touch, and then play forward. So the focus is, because the rest of the session with our small-sided games is going to be moving the ball out of areas quickly into space. So in here, trying to move the ball out of areas quickly to play forward, okay, getting it out of central areas to play high, so focusing on our movement, moving into wider areas, or okay to combine centrally, and then looking to play high again. So again, our movements, moving up one place each time, then moving out wide, and then moving back to the start. We will now move into our first animation before moving on to part 2 of this week's session. Now moving into part 2 of this week's session, we're now moving into our first small-sided game-based scenario. So we're going to be splitting our group into 2 groups of 6, okay? So the focus is going to be on moving when we haven't got the ball, so passing and moving, so looking to retain possession of the ball, okay, by moving it quickly and our movement off the ball. In terms of the setup, okay, we're going to have a 30 by 30 box, okay, split into 10s. So we've got 10, 20, 30, 10, 20, 30, and then all the other boxes in here are all 10 by 10, okay? So what you can do to start with is maybe not focus on the boxes too much, but then start to bring constraints in, okay? So you can do a set amount of passes to score a goal each time, and you can also do constraints in terms of to increase the movement. Once a player has passed in a box, they have to move, okay? So it can be, if the Blues receive it here, and this player receives the ball in here and plays into another box, they then have to move, even if it's just 5 yards into this box, to somewhere else to then increase the movement. You can have players dropping in, you can have another player dropping in short, okay, to receive it in here, and then we're creating more angles, okay, and more options on the ball with another player moving in here. With it being 6v6, the players can move freely. You could even lock them into areas where it's 2v2, but there's 3 boxes, so you can look to spread it out. Okay, so the teams are just looking to keep possession, so you've got players moving all the time. You could have players dropping in short, but we're still trying to keep that height, width and depth. So then if players start to we're moving around, okay? What we're trying to do is occupy the space, okay, and broaden our options on the ball, okay, make the pitch wide as well, and stretching it so it's harder to defend. Whereas if we had all 6 players, okay, all bunched up in this area here, okay, with space vacated behind, okay, eventually the ball's going to get lost, okay, because we're inviting pressure on the ball in a tight area, which means that it can be won back, okay, easier. Whereas if we have the pitch more spread out, so if we have players here, players central, players wide, okay, as you see now, it's harder to defend. So if these players wanted to try and lock onto here, okay, they're leaving gaps in the middle of the pitch for us to play through. Okay, we're going to get that movement inside the pitch. Okay, we can get movement in wide areas. So it's increasing players' awareness, okay, the concentration, okay, and that ability to move to receive the ball. So you could do, like we say, a set amount of passes. It could be every 5 passes is a goal. Maybe after 10 passes, you make it 2 touch. After 20 passes, you make it 1 touch, okay? And like if they're playing in the same area, it can be 2 touch if they're trying to play through. You could then look to bring in, like you say, the constraints of first where players are locked into certain zones. That's just in terms of you wanted to increase movements in a certain area and make it difficult for the players to get on the ball. Obviously, that's focusing on what age group you're working with, the ability of the players as well, and how many players that you have. So then as well, if you had goalkeepers in this part of the session, let's say you had 2 goalkeepers, you could have a goal either end, and it could be that when a team wins the ball back, they can look to score, or one team's just attacking one side and the other team's attacking the other side, but they're looking to get the ball into an area to score by passing and moving, okay? So it's again creating those goal scoring opportunities by moving the ball quickly. So you could even have small-sided goals in, one team's attacking one end, one team's attacking the other, okay? And again, that focus, when you transition and get the ball back, it's, okay, can we look to spread out now, okay? Can we look to stretch the pitch to play so we can get movements, okay? Different angles to receive the ball, players dropping in, players taking up different positions. When they've played it, instead of standing still, okay, move into space, you can stretch another player out, we can receive it, we can play out again. And then look at that, we get lots of movements on and off the ball. So again, it increases that awareness, the spatial awareness, the positional awareness, okay, the tempo again, the ability to focus on our receiving skills, so our first touch, our movement towards the ball, our body shape to receive as well. We will now move into our next animation before moving on to the final part of this week's session. Okay, now moving into the final part of this week's session, we're now moving into our second small-sided game, which is focusing on moving the ball through the thirds in an 8v4 scenario. In terms of the setup, again, we're going to go with 30 yards of depth and 30 yards of width. If you want to increase that, depending on your numbers and what the age group that you're working with, that's fine. So it'll just be 10, 20, 30, and then 30 yards across, okay? So again, if you wanted to increase a certain area, you can. If you have goalkeepers, again, it could just be used on transition for them to score, or one team can look to attack one side, one team can look to attack another side. So we're going to be focusing on the blues and greens starting in possession. So it's giving angles to players in possession. Players are free to move anywhere, okay? But they're focusing on moving the ball through the thirds, okay? So the ball could get played into the greens here. As soon as we're into there, you can have players pulling off into space, okay? So one of the yellows might block an avenue off for the blue players to receive the ball. Can the green player up high here look to help receive it? When they receive it in here, we can have options to play through the thirds. It can be bounced out again. It can then be played through. And then again, can we look to get players pulling out into space? Okay, we can have players dropping in again. So we're focusing on these blue players constantly being on the move, okay, to give ourselves more options. With it being an 8v4, for the yellows, they're looking to obviously win it back quickly. When the yellows win it back, what we're going to be focusing on is the yellow and blues staying in the middle for now, but it could just be whichever team loses the ball out of the greens and the blues, then swap over. Or if you wanted the blues and yellows to be in for a certain amount of time, it can be obviously then the blues would then swap over with the yellows, and then after a certain amount of time, you might swap the greens over with somebody else. It just depends on how you want to work it. So again, you see we've got options high, okay, we've got options centrally, okay, and we've got options stretching out the pitch so we can get played in, played high, okay, we can look to combine in here. So we've got two players in a wide area now, we can look to get an overload, keep moving that ball, okay, again, it can be a set amount of passes, get a goal. It could be every time the ball moves in the thirds and out the other side, you can look to reward that as well. And then again, try and limit touches. So after a certain amount of passes, if, you know, obviously for the yellows, they're in an underloaded situation, it could be after 10 passes, 2 touches, 20 passes, 1 touch, which can be more realistic now than the last drill, because there's an overload in here, so there's more options for the players in possession. So again, as you can see, we're stretching the pitch, okay, we're getting options high, okay, we're getting options through the third, okay, and we're getting options with our depth as well, so we can play in. If there's time on it, that communication of turn, can we get options on the ball? And then it's players sensing the opportunities to get on it. So once players have moved and received the ball, can they move out? Okay, they might come into central areas to bounce passes, play through, and then the greens get it, and eventually the yellows might win the ball back, okay, they look to play in, it gets intercepted. So then, depending on how you do it, so if the greens lost the ball there, you could do the greens go in instantly, and you could say to the blues, okay, blues, you look to stretch the pitch a bit higher, okay, greens are looking to win it back, and the yellows are looking to combine with the blues to keep the ball, okay, so they're getting those options high, getting those options wide, and stretching the pitch as well, making it difficult for the blues to defend the space, okay, and then if the blues, whoever loses the ball then can swap over, or we can do it the opposite way, where even if the greens or the blues lost it at the start, it would be the blues that swapped over. So we're still trying to get options in central areas, okay, to play through, but trying to use these wide areas, okay, to create options to play passes forward and through the thirds. We will now move into our final animation before concluding this week's session. Thanks for watching this week's video. Don't forget to head over to our website where you can sign up to view all of our exclusive content. And we'll see you next week for another Session Sunday.